Welcome to 247 Real Talk. I'm your host, Julian Perry. It's a pleasure to be here with you again for another episode of the 247 Real Talk podcast. I hope you had a great week since we last spoke. I always want to hear from you and know that all went well and you're living your best life. And after listening to my previous episode, you're empowered and you're fired up and you're ready to go. I had a pretty decent week. It's still cold in New York, but I'm dealing with it. Looking forward to the spring coming soon. And with spring and with the coming to the end of this month, we are looking at an election in November of this year, just about a little over 9 months from now. And while many of my supporters know that I've sort of kept away from the political discussion, I think with all the questions I've gotten and all the probing I've gotten, people have said, no, I've got to jump in there because I've got to help us navigate with my thoughts and sharing your thoughts, this process that we're going through. So I'm going to venture into this area, starting with this first episode. Maybe we'll call it Road to Elections. And when I come back, we're going to talk a little bit about where we are and where we're going and how this will progress as the months go. So sit back, relax, and I will be right back with you. So I'm back. Thanks again for joining me on the 247 Real Talk podcast. Again, my name is Julian Perry. I'm your host. And as always, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Before I start the episode, I'm going to ask you to like, subscribe, and please, please, please share the podcast. I want to welcome all those new subscribers as I see the podcast continue to grow. I'm a far way from where I want to get and for the volume of people I want in the conversation how I want it to grow. But I'm thankful for each and every one of you who takes the time every week to subscribe. I'm thankful for my audio-only listeners that listen to me on the various apps and and on the website. And so here we go. Before I start the episode, I think and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think February 21st is the anniversary of the assassination of Malcolm X. And if I'm right, I want to honor him with that, with mentioning that today. So, election 2024. We're looking at, I want to say, two presumptive candidates. And I'll start with the Democrats, and then I'll move to the Republicans, and I'll go back and forth for a little bit. This will not be a long episode because this will just be the seed I'm planting for the future conversations as we get closer and closer to elections. So we have two candidates that are running for president. And they have set a record, and they've broken a record. They set a record as the two oldest candidates ever to run for president of the United States in the history of the United States. And they've broken the previous record set by themselves, the same two gentlemen who are the oldest candidates running for president of the United States. Now, before I get into each individual one and give you some just preliminary thoughts to leave this podcast with, my personal thoughts are, why? I mean, we looked at the primaries, and I can't talk about Democrat because they haven't had their primaries yet, right? Or they have, but I think President Biden in the states have already run, I think it's Vegas, somewhere else. He's run unopposed. I think there was one state where he decided not to go on the ballot, and because that state was not supposed to be first, some controversy like that, and he had write-in candidates who wrote his name on the ballot, and he still won. How do two of the oldest men ever to run for the presidency of the United States in a nation of possibly 350 counted legal residents, legal dwellers, and out of that, there's got to be, I don't know what the figure is of how many are actually citizens of the United States, but we're talking about a number in the millions. How does that happen? And this nation, this great nation of ours, struggles to find two candidates who are formidable enough, who are knowledgeable enough, who are driven enough, who have vision enough to challenge the two existing presumptive candidates and win. We have seen this nation in a place of turmoil since the January 6th insurrection. We have not been able to rest. We've been bombarded by court cases and lawsuits and threats and vile statements and lies and truths and everything else thrown back and forth across the aisles between the two parties. And you know what's amazing? Normally, you have two candidates in this country has been, primarily Democrat and Republican, who have been at the forefront, who sell their positions and fight for our votes to become president of the United States. But if you look carefully, what we have right now are the constituents, the Democrats of the country and the Republicans of the country, fighting each other while the candidates look on, while the candidates egg each side on to fight each other. May the best person win. We're not sitting back as a united nation and listening to these two candidates' positions and making an informed and intelligent decision. Every time one of them holds a rally, and I'm gonna say specifically at this point, because the Republican Party is what's ramped up right now. Every time presumptive candidate Trump holds a rally, what we hear coming out of that is more hate than more unity. And let's talk about that for a moment. Let's talk about that side of the aisle for a moment. So I read today where Nikki Haley has been fighting real hard for what she believes in. And the pundits are saying, that she should have dropped out already. And then the after she didn't, the next comment is that if she loses her home state of South Carolina, she's done. I read today where she says, no, I'm not. She says within the next 2 months, shortly after that, we have 20 states that will hold primaries. As I think about why she would stay in this race, knowing that she will receive nothing but hatred and vile comments and attitudes being spewed towards her by those who believe in that ex-President Trump is somehow mightier than God. And I say that not because I'm being partisan, don't get me wrong. I'm saying that based on the behavior of the people who support. Okay? I've long said this to everyone who has listened to my podcast. I'm a very neutral person. I will sit here and admit that I have gone into the voting booth for different levels of elections and picked candidates from both sides because I paid attention to the candidate and I felt they were the right person for the job based on what they sold me as who they are, irrespective of party. Where I come from is the place of a human being, where we need to live a life where we unite, where we need to understand that, again, I always say government is elected by the people to work for the people. And therefore, when we take the time out to fight each other, instead of focusing on the candidates and getting their positions and maybe debating them in our private rooms or whatever, but not with the anger and hatred I've seen that has come out of the last few years. People have been threatened. People have been attacked in many different ways, even physically, over two candidates or over candidates who, as I said, don't know us personally. People are hurting others over a candidate they may never meet and may only see from a distance if they manage to go to a rally. Yet they're willing to put their lives on the line. Look at the January 6th insurrection. There was one military personnel, a young lady who I believe was shot and killed by the Secret Service as she breached the chamber, lost their life. Well, she lost her life for what? And for whom? Do we think that when these people make policies in government, they think about you and me? Or what's best for them? We keep electing the wrong people. We keep deciding that it's okay as a nation that has all this power in the citizens to allow an aristocracy in Washington, and we sit back and say it's okay. There are members of Congress who have spent so many terms there they forgot when they started. And we let it be. I've held an episode before and I've discussed the fact that we need to put term limits across this country. I'm still out in terms of the Supreme Court because I'm struggling with that in terms of term limits for many reasons. And we'll have that conversation in a different episode. But in terms of House of Representatives, in terms of the Senate, 2 terms. If you manage to make 8 years, fine. If you did good, fine. If you didn't, fine. We were out of there. Let's get fresh blood in. Let's make it a system where people feel that they have a chance to make a difference in this country, especially if they're driven by the ideas of unity and the correct ideologies, and not be dissuaded by the fact that, oh, there's an aristocracy in Washington, so why even bother to try? In many ways, I think that's what happens here. People just assume that President Biden will be the presumptive candidate, and President Trump himself assumed he was the presumptive candidate, made sure that his followers spewed such hate at the other candidates that eventually he knocked them out of the race one by one. That's one of the reasons I have a lot of respect for what Nikki Haley is doing. I'm not talking about her and her policies. That's a whole different story. I'm talking about the fact that she believes what she believes in and she's staying in the race. And I think that even if she loses South Carolina, if the next 20 states over the next 2 months, if she wins a few, she would break a ceiling to me in a sense. Maybe the country is ready for a female president. I'm not saying her. But we as men have run this country for how many years, and the track record in many cases is not so good. So now we get to a point where we the people will go through probably the most difficult time in our lives over the next 9 months. There'll be those of us who will shy away from the news. And I have many friends who say, I don't watch the news anymore. And at one point I felt that was okay. But then I started to think that hiding from the truth and hiding from what's going on doesn't make it okay. I understand the struggle. Just turn the news on. Before you get to the political part of the news, if you're here in New York, for instance, and this is the process I go through, the challenge. I turn on the news, the weather sucks. Okay, well, none of our fault, right? Then there seems to be an epidemic of hit and run accidents in New York, and probably a 50-50 where people die. And this seems to be going on and on and on. They do catch the people, but they're either drunk, they're whatever. But there's situations in New York where somebody got hit and run, and then a second car came and hit them again and ran while they were lying in the street. Then we turn from that, we see the felonies that are going on in the New York City subway every single day. Shoving on the track, people being robbed, people being stabbed, people being hit in the head with objects every day. Then we turn to the political news, and we can't find any clear direction because we have this fighting that's going on between the people instead of the candidates. President Biden has had many missteps in speeches where he's forgotten stuff. That is a reality. Losing your short-term memory or making or having momentary recollection issues, in my personal opinion, is not an issue of competency. It's an issue that you're getting older and that happens, because guess what? I do it too, and I'm nowhere near President Biden's age. That doesn't make me incompetent to do my job. We have to understand, number one, that the job of running the country, this country and being president of the United States is a stressful job. I remember when President Obama went into office, he had black hair. When he came out, he was gray in 8 years. And he didn't come out that old that he should have been that gray. It is a job that they wake you up at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. There's stress. There's, what can start a war, what can't start a war, who got taken hostage, what's going on in the country, immigration, poverty, housing, unemployment, taxes. It goes on and on. So I can understand anyone from either side of the aisle who says to me they believe that both of these candidates need to give it a rest. Why can't we find young blood and people who are ready to step up and be a part of the leadership of this country? We meet intelligent people every single day who have positions. And then I realize part of it is what I'm talking about. Part of it is the aristocracy and the arrogance of Washington to break into that space. I mean, in New York, we had a representative in the House of Representatives who was expelled, George Santos. And this man made it all the way to being elected and sworn in as a member of the House of Representatives on a complete base made up of lies. And no one seemed to bother to check or even start to yell and scream about it until after he campaigned, after he won, after he was sworn in. Why are we so detached from everything in our own lives, in our own country that will make a difference in our lives, that we're willing to just listen to someone or not, or just go vote and don't even take the time to find out what the candidate is about? We recently had Tom Suozzi and Mazi Phillips run to replace George Santos. And Tom Suozzi won the race. Now, prior to that race, I heard that Mazi Phillips was a staunch supporter of ex-President Trump. Yet when she lost, he ridiculed her and told her that, she didn't embrace him or some nonsense like that. It's like a narcissist could never be wrong. And whether you like it or not, that's what he is. One is in denial and one's a narcissist. We need clear leadership in this country. If either one of these men are gonna get the support of the majority, they need to embrace us as people. I forget the policies and forget everything else. Forget all the noise for a second. And they need to be true to themselves. The fact that with aging, things happen. I think part of what the nation is worried about is as you get older under that stress, we don't want all of a sudden to have a situation where we're looking to the next in command because of what the stress the job brings. But I think that the reason why one set of noise seems overwhelming over another is because so much of the nation has tuned out. I remember many years ago when people were running, I'm going back to Carter and Reagan and both Bushes, when they were running for president, the conversation was different. Yes, the ideologies of Republican and Democrat are complete and total polar opposites, but the conversations were different. And the resulting conversations that I had were maybe heated debates, but they didn't destroy friendships. They didn't destroy lives. They didn't create such hatred that we decided that it was okay to hurt another human being over our belief in another human being. That's almost like if on an appeal to many of you who have this ideology in your head. Think about your children. If you love your children and you have two children that are different and you love them both, would you decide to pit one against the other? Or would you love them for who they are individually and look at the positives of each child? Our job as human beings, our job as citizens of the United States is to look out for what's best for us. To pick the candidate that's going to do the majority of good for us. Understanding that what us means is that we have a large low income. We have also a large middle income. And the middle income and lower income together make up the majority of this nation. The rich, the wealthy is a small percentage. And they're the ones that are making the decisions on our lives, not to benefit the majority, but to benefit their minority. And we can pick up the crumbs of what's left. When you finish going out there and committing a crime or hurting someone because they have a different ideology than you, and you get home, when you go out and you destroy someone's life because they believe in a different candidate than you do, and you go home because you supported the candidate that you felt so strongly about that you were willing to hurt someone else physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever. When you get to your address, does your house look bigger? Did you leave it as a one family house and come back to a mansion? Did you leave a quarter of an acre and come back to a 5-acre house? If you pull up the app on your phone, you go to your bank, did your bank account increase by millions? What was the benefit of being so hateful to another person? What's the benefit of us being hateful to each other over one person or candidate of choice? There's a sad part of that. Because from what my ears have heard and what I'm seeing is we are regressing. We're going back to a time where wealth has been put aside, quality of life has been put aside, and race is rearing its ugly head. A lot of people have different opinions about their fellow citizens because of the color of their skin. People of color are once again facing challenges that we thought were not over, but going away, and we were getting more progressive of human beings. You've heard me many times talk about Generation Z and how much they intermarry in all races. And when I see them, when I walk down the street and I see Generation Z and I see, all these different races and ethnicities intermingling, intermarrying, and being happy. Those are the moments that I have hope. Because quite honestly, my generation before me, we should be ashamed of ourselves for what we've done to this country and this world. You cannot turn a blind eye. You cannot turn off the news and think that when you turn it back on, the world will change for the better. There's only one way to make a difference. Not guaranteed success, but if you have it in you that you want to make a difference, then you've got to turn the news on. I hate to tell you this. You've got to hear what's going on in the world. You've got to pick a way to help. You've got to join forces in the right movement. And you've got to step forward to make a difference. You might not win the battle. As I heard Jon Stewart say, your candidate may not win. But what's going on and leading up now to the election and what comes after the election will impact us all, irrespective of who wins. Our lives will be impacted irrespective of who wins. This direction that we're going in that seems to be degrading our quality of life will continue irrespective of the candidate. The world is changing. We are entering a difficult and dangerous phase that only we uniting and standing strong and believing and fighting have a chance to hold on to some quality of life as the world turns its back on everything that's decent and honorable. This is the first episode. It's a blunt one letting you know that you've got a struggle ahead, that your days and nights will be interrupted by politics and by those who support candidates who have no clue what they stand for, but their anger is driven by politics. If you think that what's happened so far has got you so disgusted that you can't look at the news, what's to come is far worse. And the only way that you can get involved is to be strong and to listen, to be aware of what's going on. Now, I know what you're going to say, the news is biased. Yes, it is. But that's a lot of the reasons why I listen tonight and I research. Even if you want to go online, if you don't want to hear it in your ear and you want to do your own research and you want to look online, look at different news outlets. Look at those that are biased in one direction and those that are biased in the other direction, and then try to find a middle ground that makes sense. Determine what you need to do to help your children, your family make a difference. Determine where you need to join forces, whether it be with this podcast or some other podcast or some other movement or some other organization, something. If you have an organization and you haven't joined 247 Real Talk podcast, but you want my podcast to become a part of your organization and you stand for the right thing, then send me an email and I will join you. This is about unity. It doesn't matter who comes to who, but we have to come together. This is going to be a tough road to election. And it's going to be tough even after the election. So, while I said, yes, I would stay away from politics, obviously I've had to delve into this to start the conversation. As I continue the conversation, it won't be every episode either, so don't get it twisted that, oh, I don't know if I can listen because he's going to talk more politics. No, we're still going to talk about all the other topics we talk about because they're relevant and they're embedded into this thing we call life. But maybe once a month, we'll talk about what went on for the month in politics. And maybe in between, there might be an episode if something significant happens. But my job, hopefully, and my intention here is to help you through this. And in doing so, I'm hoping it helps me through this. And together come the day after the election in November. Whatever happens, we can stand strong and continue to live our lives for ourselves and our families and our nation, knowing that we stand for what's right and what's true, and we've given ourselves in numbers enough power to keep it going. Thanks again for always supporting 247 Real Talk podcast. It is always my honor and pleasure to speak with you. I do my best to remain completely neutral because in my heart, I'm more about the issues. I'm not about a candidate. I thank you so much for joining me. I wish you a wonderful week ahead. For those of you who are in the states that are cold, bundle up, stay warm. For those of you who are lucky enough to enjoy the warm weather, well, and the beaches this time of year, well, good for you. But once again, it's always been my pleasure. I remind you to please like, please subscribe, and please share. And until we chat again, do as I always ask you to do. Take care of yourselves, and please take care of each other.